Hello and welcome to a new Rage Gaming video. My name is Hollow and today we're checking out ArcheAge Unchained, the sandbox MMORPG re-released last year with the Unchained tagline. The original game, though successful, did have a lot of issues in regards to pay-to-win elements and quality of life aspects that Unchained addressed and in major part fixed. It's a combination of improvements and updates from that original game to this Unchained version, and now, for example, instead of a subscription, it's a one-time purchase too. This was an MMO I'd been meaning to check out after the whole Unchained version released on Steam, so we're happy to be approached by the ArcheAge team who have sponsored this video. Use our link in the description to check out the game yourself and support the channel. But with that said, this is a massive MMO with an incredible amount of choices and paths of progression, so when we were asked to check it out, I decided I'd give my first impressions and talk about what are my favorite aspects of the game. I've come up with 5 different reasons why you might want to check out ArcheAge Unchained in 2020, so let's get started. Okay, for number 1, I'm just going to hit you with it because this is honestly ridiculous. ArcheAge Unchained has a total of 220 possible classes to play. Yeah, basically, there's 12 skill sets to choose between, right? Each skill set has a unique playstyle, abilities, passives, and so on. Just in concept, that's crazy and overwhelming, but how it works is actually surprisingly reasonable. So as you create a character, you'll choose between the 6 different beginner skill sets to get you going. And in my case, I picked Swiftblade, the class that was most recently added to the game. It's basically a fast-moving, teleporting rogue type. Then as we progress our character and level up, we'll unlock the second skill set, and then at level 15, our last and third skill set. So these combination of 3 at once are how you create and choose your class. In my case, I picked Swiftblade, right? And then combined that with the Shadowplay skill set. These 2 specs work really well together, providing stealth, poisons, burst damage with one another. And finally, for my third, I picked Songcraft, which provides utility like playing a burst movement speed to escape a bad situation or buffing my damage. These 3 skill sets combined to create the Dusk Dirge class. And I found this great for leveling, letting me burst targets down, reposition mid-combat easily, with that utility of the Songcraft skill set providing even more damage buffs on top of my poison. It was really good. And through this system, I could technically pick Swiftblade and Shadowplay again, right? But say, instead of picking Songcraft, I went with something like Occultism. This would provide me with better survivability, which is very useful during leveling, giving me stuns, traps, even the ability to play dead to trick enemies. This class combination would be known as the Immortalist, which sounds a lot cooler, I'll give it that. Basically, 2 skill set combos, and then you have a third one picked for an offhand style utility based on whatever it is you're doing. But even then, if there wasn't that third skill set, there's so many playstyles here, it's ridiculous. And I think this is always going to be great for someone who loves experimenting with different classes, because you can easily swap between these skill sets and create a new class at any time via any of the new priestesses you find around the world. I've pretty much seen them at every town or hub in every zone I've been in. So you've got a ridiculous amount of classes to choose between and playstyles you can swap around, but what is this combat system actually like? To start off, ArcheAge Unchained uses the classic tab targeting system with your abilities and weapon attacks, but where it feels really good is probably the combo system. You use different skills that can be combined together for greater effects, which becomes more impactful in parties and groups where you combine these skills. Something as simple as playing an aura song on your flute. If multiple players sync up their same aura song, you could say move quickly while we play in a dungeon or something. But these combos work for your own skills too in solo play. Some abilities, like the very first one I had as Swiftblade, has 3 special attacks, which in my case resulted in a final attack dashing forward for a double strike, which is useful for repositioning combat, but there's also ways I could debuff an enemy, making it more vulnerable to another ability as following up. These abilities will light up orange on my hotbar, as you'll see, showing that that ability will now deal more damage or be more effective comboing with whatever I just did. So when you combine different abilities from, say, the Swiftblade and the Shadowplay skill sets, there's tons of overlap and combos created depending on what fight you're in and what you need. This felt like it created more of an engaging system where instead of just pressing my longest cooldowns first and then working on a priority system of what comes back first, I would plan my attacks out before I do them a little bit more than normal. Another neat thing about the combat I noticed was my ability to happily use a bow without being an archer of any kind. because I can be any class and swap between them easily and use any weapon at any time, I'm able to use something as useful like that, like kiting an enemy and doing good damage while they can't fight back. And absolutely spamming arrows too, there's basically no cooldown on this thing. Generally though, the visuals for the attacks are short and sweet. In the most recent update I mentioned, they'd updated the VFX for different attacks and it really does show. A lot of my abilities have a flashy but short blue or purple burst of colour to them, with wide slashes or stabs. Even the basic attacks can be really quick and pretty visceral, but in general I found the combat really satisfying. Working on those combos, moving around mid-combat, swapping weapons and building up my playstyle as I unlock more and more skills and skill sets with those abilities. Things progressed really quickly and it felt really good trying to understand my class and what I can get away with and what I can actually do. Alright, so the combat feels good, there's an insane amount of classes, now let's pile it on top with even more of a ridiculously big system for an MMO, the profession system. Following suit with the crazy amount of classes, ArcheAge Unchained has currently a whopping 22 crafting professions, which you can simultaneously engage with at any time as one character. So in this system, almost everything you do in crafting requires something called labor points, which you have a certain amount per day. So rather than being limited by, say, a profession's cap of 2 or 3 like in a normal MMO, here you're limited by where you want to spend your daily labor points. Cost of labor can be tiny for something like gathering or mining, or huge for, say, an advanced action like building or a bigger project. So as mentioned, there's 22 possible professions to work on. Obvious ones like gathering-based professions, like I mentioned, mining, or fishing, or herbing, known as gathering in this game. Or classic crafting professions like weaponry, metalwork, leatherworking, or even tailoring. Basically, you gather resources of whatever kind you're after, and then process or craft that at the relevant workstation. But I found the game goes a bit further with some more unique professions like printing, larceny, husbandry, masonry, and so on. All of this stuff fuels the world, and as a sandbox MMO, tons of content is created by the players, so these more complex professions are ideal for that, encouraging players to interact with each other. I'd say the most interesting profession that I looked at was construction, where you build structures like the houses that we find around the world, or also ships too. The housing in ArcheAge is totally different from any other MMO I played. Instead of having their own instance you invite your friends to, they actually take up physical space in the real world and in the zones you level in. Set in special residential zones, these large areas are filled with player houses that you can check out, or like I did, sneak into if they just leave them open. They got things like different furniture and cool cosmetic items, artwork, and there's totally different housing styles too. I've seen lots of different types of buildings in different sections of the world. Probably the coolest I saw was this strange plant treehouse thing. So if there were no players in the world, I guess these areas would be a bit barren and flat, but they're always completely filled with player houses, and actually, you know, it would be completely different on another server because different players are built there. Obviously, the construction profession is ideal for working on your own home or working with other players with theirs, but whether you're planting trees in a public farm or gathering plants and doing some alchemy, so much of it is intertwined and useful to the many other professions and of course the other players. It's a really neat system. The only downside is that limit with the labor points. This system was no issue for me while I was leveling. The cost of labor was so small on everything I did, and I think I had like 5,000 points to work with each day. But I'd be interested to hear from you guys, how does the labor system work at endgame and at the cap? Now for my fourth reason you might want to try ArcheAge Unchained, I'm going to go with a classic one, which is exploring a new world in this sandbox style. And with that, there's always something great about exploring a totally new world that, yeah, has its dedicated stories and questing and zones and such, but there's a lot of freedom in the exploration here. There's a surprising amount of verticality here, clearly encouraged by the glider system. As you level up, you'll be given a mount, a glider, and a boat very early on in the game, letting you go wherever you want, allowing you to explore or traverse the land however you'd like. You can easily climb up any mountain without many invisible walls to stop you, and then make that big leap and glide across a new zone, or take a huge shortcut compared to walking through and around the many obstacles. With all the different regions that I played in, like the Elven Forest, or the green plains of the human land, or the farmland, or the harsh deserts or volcanic regions, there's a lot of variety going on here in the regions and their terrain. But what's unique here is that, of course, every server will have a totally different player land. I think what I appreciated most about this exploration that I was doing was this older style of MMO I found in ArcheAge. The way the enemies are laid out, or the towns and the people dotted around. Something about it gave me nostalgia for my first 3D MMOs when I finally tried something other than RuneScape as a kid. Either way, it's always going to feel good playing a new MMO MMO in a new world, and I think this does a good job of letting you explore with the tools it gives you and the very limited restrictions on the exploration itself. Finally, I want to mention the update that affected a few things, that Shadows Revealed update. This came last year with the launch of Unchained as part of the progression of the game. As it turned 5 years old, we had this big announcement for the big visual overhaul, the newest skill set, the Swiftblade that I've been playing, new ancestral skills for the original classes, alongside other stuff like combat balancing and the revamp of the siege and territory systems. The updates seem to be a big part of the progression of the original ArcheAge to Unchained, adding things like the updated Elven race with all their new customization options, for example. The character creator in this game was pretty robust, reminding me of, say, Black Deserts, with lots of options and features, but then kind of a silly amount of sliders and specific manipulation for those that really want to go deep on that. Or hey, just make a ridiculous looking character if that's your thing. It felt like I had a good look at some of the different stuff that changed in the game with this update, because I was playing an elf myself. I was in the starting forest that was also visually updated. And on top of this update, there was the obvious huge shift between the original game and the Unchained version, dealing with the pay-to-win issues. So it seems like the game was set up in a much better position at its launch. Lastly though, as part of the sponsor, I was asked to mention the ARCHEPASSES system in the game, which basically gives you extra optional stuff to work on as you're leveling up or even at the end game. Every 3 months the game goes through a new season, and you'll have access to 3 different passes focused on 3 different playstyles: combat, vocation, and equipment. So you pick whatever you are working on or appeals to you, and it'll take you around a month to work through these and complete them with 2 tracks of progression. This gives you different missions based on the pass you've selected, and in doing so, levels up the pass for different rewards at each tier. The pass has 2 tracks, 2 versions. There's the free pass. Everyone can use this for useful items like labor potions or infusions or even the diligence coins, while the premium version requires a purchase and rewards things like cosmetic items, costumes, and dye tickets. Rather than having anything pay to win in it, it's just cosmetic stuff, which is nice to hear. Those diligence coins that I mentioned that you can earn through this can be spent on useful items on the marketplace. There's really useful stuff here that in some cases can only be bought with these coins, like labor recharges, charms, boosts, pets, farm kits. And since you can only get these via this method, that makes the passes well worth engaging with at endgame. It seems like a good system for those that actually want to use this as an extra optional thing to work on. So there's a few reasons why you might want to try ArcheAge Unchained. I've enjoyed my time exploring a new world and a new MMO. It's always a good time whatever MMO it is you're playing. You got a new lore, you got new classes, new world, and I'd never played an MMO that's so sandboxy like this one, so it's really different for me. And I also know in the future, maybe say after another big update, I can come back whenever I need because I don't need to sub, I've already bought the game. This game is also apparently endgame heavily based on PvP from what I know, and there's open world PvP on top. So as you progress past the main story, you eventually reach areas that are contested regions, where players can actually attack each other. This is decided by times of peace and times of war. So whenever it's peacetime, it's safe to work on those quests, do professions and tasks in the zone. But when it's at war, you're rewarded for engaging in the PvP, so you have to watch out for other players. To me, it seems like most MMOs have lost open world PvP, and I used to love it back in the day. But I can understand why that it's not a thing as much anymore, because it's hard to do without upsetting people. And I don't even know if this system's perfect for it too. I've already been ganked while in a quest dialogue, which sucked. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Once again, be sure to use our link in the description if you want to check out the game yourself. But for now, thanks again. I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you next time.